Some people think power is the badge on their chest. They never see the trap until it closes. Rain tapped softly against the windshield as the city of Atlanta glowed in streaks of red and gold across the wet pavement. The parking garage under Peachtree Plaza was nearly empty at 9:17 p.m., just the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant echo of tires rolling somewhere above. Officer Daniel Mercer stood in the shadow beside a concrete pillar, latex gloves tight against his hands, breath steady, eyes locked on a dark blue Lexus sedan parked 3 spaces ahead. He checked his watch once, then slipped a small evidence pouch from the inside pocket of his jacket. White powder sealed behind plastic. Enough to ruin a life. Enough to make headlines. Enough to make everyone believe the story he had already written in his mind. He moved quickly, calm as a man who had done this before. One glance left. One glance right. The garage was empty. His hand reached the passenger door, then paused when he heard footsteps. A woman's heels clicked across the upper level, then faded. Silence again. Mercer opened the door just enough, leaned in, and slid the pouch beneath the front seat. His jaw tightened with satisfaction. Tonight, he whispered to himself, we finally got her. He shut the door gently and stepped back into the shadows just as the elevator chimed. Naomi Carter emerged carrying a leather tote and a paper cup of coffee gone cold. 38 years old, poised, tailored navy coat, eyes that missed nothing. She walked with the calm rhythm of someone who had long ago learned that attention followed her whether she wanted it or not. In boardrooms, airports, luxury hotels, courthouse hallways. Places where certain people still looked twice and wondered why she belonged there. Naomi had seen those looks for years. Tonight, she barely noticed them. She crossed the garage, unlocked the Lexus, and set her bag in the passenger seat. Mercer watched from behind the pillar, expecting nerves, hesitation, some sign that guilt had already entered the car. But she moved without hurry. She adjusted the mirror, started the engine, and pulled away smoothly, taillights glowing red in the mist. Mercer smiled and touched the radio clip to his shoulder. Unit ready. Target is moving southbound. 3 minutes later, Naomi guided the Lexus onto Peachtree Street where storefront lights shimmered across the rain-slick road. Traffic was light. A delivery truck ahead. A rideshare sedan behind. Jazz played low through the speakers. She took one hand off the wheel and tapped a voicemail notification from her mother. Baby, don't work too late. Sunday dinner at 2, and don't bring that store-bought pie again. Naomi smiled for the first time that night. Then blue lights exploded in her rearview mirror. 1 cruiser. Then 2. Then 5. Sirens rose sharp through the wet air as police units boxed her in from every side, forcing the Lexus to the curb outside a crowded late-night diner where customers pressed against the windows to watch. Phones lifted instantly. Cameras recording. Naomi placed both hands on the steering wheel and looked forward. Her expression did not change. Officer Mercer stepped from the lead cruiser with the confidence of a man walking onto a stage built for him. Rain dotted his uniform. His flashlight beam cut through the glass. Driver, turn off the vehicle and step out now. Naomi complied slowly, coat collar lifted against the drizzle. People gathered under the diner awning across the street. A teenager whispered, "What did she do?" Mercer circled her car dramatically, letting the moment grow larger with every second. He said loudly enough for the crowd to hear, "We received information regarding narcotics trafficking connected to this vehicle." Murmurs rippled through the sidewalk. Naomi met his eyes for the first time. There was no panic there. No pleading. No anger. Just stillness. The kind that unsettles men who mistake noise for control. Mercer leaned closer, lowering his voice. "You're done." Naomi glanced once at the trunk of her car, then back at him. And to Mercer's surprise, she smiled. The smile lasted less than a second, but it landed harder than any accusation Officer Daniel Mercer had planned to make that night. Rain slid down the hood of the Lexus in thin silver lines while the crowd under the diner Orning leaned forward, hungry for answers. Mercer straightened his shoulders and signaled to the other officers. Search the vehicle. 2 patrolmen moved quickly, flashlights sweeping across the seats, floor mats, glove box, and center console. Naomi Carter stood beside the curb with her hands visible, coat damp from the drizzle, eyes calm as if she were waiting for a delayed flight instead of a public takedown. One officer crouched at the passenger side, reached beneath the seat, and froze. Got something. He lifted a clear evidence pouch into the air. The white powder inside caught the flashing lights, bright as a signal flare. Gasps rose from the sidewalk. Phones tilted higher. Someone near the diner door whispered, "I knew it." Mercer took the pouch with theatrical care, holding it between 2 fingers as if the city itself needed to witness his triumph. "Possession with intent," he announced. "Looks like your night just changed." Naomi said nothing. Her silence unsettled him more than shouting ever could. Most people denied. Most people cried. Most people begged strangers to believe them. She simply watched him the way a teacher watches a student make a confident mistake on the board. Mercer stepped closer. "You have the right to remain silent." Naomi tilted her head slightly. "That would be the first smart thing said here tonight." Several bystanders exchanged glances. Mercer felt the moment slipping, so he raised his voice again. "Turn around." She did not move. "Officer Mercer," she said evenly, reading the name stitched above his pocket, "before you continue, are you absolutely certain you want your team touching that car?" He laughed once, sharp and dismissive. "You are in no position to give warnings." Naomi glanced toward the intersection. Headlights approached through the rain, dark vehicles moving without sirens, too smooth to be local patrol units. Mercer did not notice. He was busy enjoying the cameras pointed his way. "People like you always think rules do not apply," he said. Naomi looked back at him. "People like me?" The question was quiet, but it carried farther than his shouting. The crowd went still. Even one of the younger officers shifted uncomfortably. Mercer ignored it. "Open the trunk," he ordered. An officer pressed the release. The trunk lifted slowly. Inside sat a hard black equipment case bolted to the frame, a compact camera rig with blinking green lights, and 3 sealed folders marked with federal warning labels. The officer nearest the trunk stepped back. "Sir, this is not normal." Mercer frowned and strode over. He opened one folder. His color drained almost instantly. Inside were photographs of him meeting known dealers, copies of unexplained deposit records, timestamps from body camera gaps, and surveillance stills from this very parking garage less than 20 minutes earlier. One image showed his gloved hand sliding the pouch beneath Naomi's seat. Rain suddenly felt colder. "What is this?" he demanded. Naomi reached into her coat slowly and produced a leather credential wallet. She flipped it open toward him. "Gold badge. Federal seal." Her voice remained level, almost gentle. "Special Agent Naomi Carter, Drug Enforcement Administration. For the last 8 months, this vehicle has been a controlled surveillance platform in an active corruption investigation." Every officer around him stopped moving. The bystanders lowered their phones, then raised them again for a different reason. Mercer stared at the badge as if refusing to read it would change reality. "That is impossible." Naomi took one step closer. "No, Officer Mercer." Impossible was thinking no one was watching. The black SUVs came to a halt behind the patrol cars. Doors opened in unison. Men and women in plain jackets moved forward through the rain, badges already visible. One voice cut clean through the night. "Federal agents. Everyone step away from the suspect." Mercer blinked. "Suspect." Naomi never looked away from him. "Yes," she said softly. "You." For one long second, the rain was the only thing moving. It tapped against squad car roofs, hissed on warm pavement, and ran down the stunned face of Officer Daniel Mercer as if the city itself had decided to wash its hands of him. The federal team advanced in measured silence, jackets dark with water, badges reflecting blue and red patrol lights. Their leader, Captain Elena Brooks, stepped forward with the calm authority of someone who never needed to raise her voice. "Officer Mercer," she said, "remove your service belt and place your hands where I can see them." Mercer looked around for support that did not come. The younger patrolman who had searched the Lexus avoided eye contact. Another officer slowly backed away from the trunk. A third reached up and turned off his body camera as if that could erase the last 10 minutes. Mercer swallowed hard. "This is a misunderstanding." Naomi Carter stood beside the curb, rain gathering at the edge of her coat collar. "No," she said. "A misunderstanding is accidental. This was scheduled." The crowd under the diner awning had gone from curious to transfixed. People who had arrived expecting scandal were now witnessing something far rarer: consequences. A woman lowered her phone and whispered to her husband. She knew the whole time. Naomi heard it and almost smiled. Mercer tried one last pivot. "You entrapped me." Captain Brooks did not blink. "You were under observation for 8 months. Tonight, you made your own choices." 2 federal agents stepped forward and relieved him of his radio, keys, and sidearm with professional efficiency. No struggle. No scene. Just the soft sounds of metal and leather changing hands. Mercer looked suddenly smaller without the tools he thought were power. He turned toward Naomi. "You set me up because of one traffic stop." Naomi's eyes hardened for the first time. "One?" She stepped closer, voice low enough that the bystanders leaned in to hear. "One grandmother whose medicine disappeared during a search. One college student charged with evidence that never existed. One father fired after a false report. One teenager whose scholarship vanished after an arrest that went nowhere. One witness intimidated into silence. One after another after another." Mercer opened his mouth, but no words came. Naomi continued. "You counted on people being too poor, too tired, or too scared to fight back. Tonight, you met paperwork." Even Captain Brooks allowed herself the faintest smile. A federal technician moved to the trunk of the Lexus and carefully disconnected the hidden camera rig. "All feeds captured," he said. "Parking garage angle, curbside angle, audio clean." Another agent lifted the sealed folders. "Chain of custody intact." Mercer stared at the evidence as if it belonged to another man. Across the street, the diner manager opened the door and called into the room, "You all better keep watching. This just turned into history." More customers stepped outside under umbrellas, drawn by the gravity of public truth. Rainwater streamed along the curb carrying cigarette butts, leaves, and the remains of a night that had gone very wrong for the wrong person. Captain Brooks nodded to her team. "Transport him." As agents guided Mercer toward a black SUV, he twisted once more toward Naomi. "This will not stick." Naomi answered without raising her voice. "You said the same thing in every internal interview." He froze. "How do you know that?" She looked toward the city skyline glowing through the storm. "Because I read all of them." The door of the SUV closed with a firm, final sound. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just final. The patrol officers left behind stood in awkward silence beside their cruisers, suddenly aware that cameras were still recording and that the woman they had watched humiliate in public had never been powerless for a single second. Naomi reached into her tote, took out the cold coffee she had carried from the garage, and set it on the hood of the Lexus. "What a waste," she murmured. Captain Brooks approached. "You all right?" Naomi looked at the rain, the flashing lights, the crowd, the officers who could not meet her eyes. "I am now." Brooks handed her a fresh cup from the SUV. "Then let us finish the paperwork." Naomi took it, warm in her hands, and glanced once at the empty place where Mercer had stood. Some men spend years planting fear. It takes only one night to harvest the truth. The rain had eased to a mist by the time Naomi Carter entered the federal field office on Ted Turner Drive. Atlanta was nearing midnight, but the building was wide awake. Elevators opened and closed, printers hummed behind glass walls, and agents moved through bright hallways carrying folders thick with names that had stayed hidden too long. Naomi walked past them with a fresh cup of coffee in one hand and a damp coat folded over the other arm. Her shoes left faint marks on the polished floor. 8 months undercover, and the loudest part of the operation had lasted less than 15 minutes. Captain Elena Brooks held the conference room door open. "You should be home." Naomi stepped inside. "I was home." Then 5 patrol cars interrupted dinner plans. Brooks smirked and slid a remote across the table. A wall screen lit up with footage from the parking garage. Daniel Mercer in latex gloves. Mercer approaching the Lexus. Mercer placing the pouch under the seat. Frame by frame, choice by choice, there was nowhere left for him to hide. Around the table sat prosecutors, analysts, and 2 representatives from internal affairs who looked as if sleep had become a rumor. One analyst tapped a keyboard. Since transport, 3 officers requested counsel, 1 sergeant called in sick, and somebody in records just tried to access sealed complaints from 2021. Brooks folded her arms. "Meaning panic has entered the building." Naomi set down her coffee and watched the screen. Mercer paused in the footage before opening her passenger door, checking both directions with the confidence of a man certain nobody important was watching. "That look," she said quietly. "That certainty is the disease." A prosecutor named Leonard Hayes adjusted his glasses. "We can charge Mercer tonight. Fabrication of evidence, civil rights violations, conspiracy depending on who talks first." Naomi nodded but did not sit. "Do not make him the headline." Hayes frowned. "He is the central figure." "No," Naomi replied. "He is the billboard. I want the company that paid for it." The room fell silent. Brooks knew what she meant. Mercer had never operated alone. Men like him survived because doors opened, reports vanished, complaints stalled, and supervisors signed forms without reading the harm inside them. A technician switched screens. Bank transfers appeared. Modest deposits under reporting thresholds. Payments routed through shell cleaning companies and towing vendors. Nothing flashy. Just enough to reward silence. And punish honesty. Mercer received regular transfers for 18 months, the technician said. Several overlap with dismissed narcotics arrests. Naomi studied the dates. Who approved evidence intake on those cases? Sergeant Ryan Holt. Brooks exhaled slowly. Of course. Naomi finally sat down. Bring him in at 6 a.m. before he hears the news cycle and starts forgetting things. Hayes scribbled notes. And if he lawyers up? Naomi lifted her coffee. Then we ask about the lake house in Alabama purchased under his brother-in-law's name. Across the room, one internal affairs investigator nearly choked on his water. Brooks raised an eyebrow. You held that back. Naomi met her gaze. I held back a lot. She opened her tote and placed a slim notebook on the table. Handwritten dates. Plate numbers. Meeting spots. Nicknames. Tiny details gathered in diners, gas stations, courthouse hallways, and charity events where crooked men shook hands in pressed uniforms. This is what bias never understands, Naomi said. When people underestimate you, they tell you everything. Hayes flipped a page and stared. How long have you had all this? Long enough to know tonight was only the front door. Outside the conference room, televisions mounted in the hallway began flashing breaking news banners. Local stations were already running cell phone footage from the curbside arrest. Mercer being escorted into a federal SUV. Naomi standing calm in the rain. The words public corruption investigation scrolled beneath her image. Brooks glanced through the glass. By sunrise, every officer in the city will know your face. Naomi looked at her reflection in the dark screen. Good. Her phone buzzed. One new voicemail from her mother. Naomi played it on speaker. "Baby, if that was you on Channel 7, call me back. And if you are still bringing store-bought pie on Sunday, do not bother coming." Laughter broke across the room for the first time all night. Naomi smiled, but only for a moment. Then she closed the notebook and stood. Mercer was step 1. Tomorrow we collect step 2. Brooks asked the question everyone else was thinking. And how many steps are there? Naomi reached for her coat. As many as it takes to teach a system that watching us was never the same as seeing us. By 5:42 a.m., Atlanta wore that strange stillness that exists only before the city remembers itself. Streetlights glowed over empty intersections, delivery trucks rolled through damp avenues, and the sky carried a pale gray promise of morning. Inside Precinct 8, the overnight shift was finishing reports while day officers drifted in with coffee cups and tired eyes. No one laughed as loudly as usual. Phones had been buzzing since midnight. Everyone had seen the footage. Everyone knew Daniel Mercer had not come home. Sergeant Ryan Holt stood in his glass office overlooking the bullpen, tie loosened, jaw clenched, television muted on the wall. Naomi Carter's image flashed across the screen beside the words "Federal Investigation Expands." Holt grabbed the remote and turned it off, but silence did nothing to help him. A desk officer knocked softly. "Sergeant, there are visitors." Holt did not ask who. He already knew. Through the blinds he saw 3 federal vehicles slide into the lot with the quiet confidence of people who did not need permission to park there. Officers at their desks suddenly became fascinated with paperwork. Conversations ended mid-sentence. Captain Elena Brooks entered first, dark coat buttoned high, badge visible but unnecessary. Naomi walked beside her carrying a slim folder and wearing the same composed expression that had unsettled Mercer the night before. Holt forced a smile as they stepped into his office. Special Agent Carter. Quite a media performance. Naomi looked around the room at commendation plaques, framed academy photos, and a shelf lined with leadership books no one had opened in years. "Good morning to you too, Sergeant." Brooks placed a warrant on the desk. "We are here for records, digital storage devices, evidence intake logs, disciplinary archives, and any personal electronics currently on city property." Holt barely glanced at the paper. "You cannot just walk in here and disrupt operations." Naomi finally sat down across from him. "That sentence has aged badly in this building." Holt leaned forward. "Mercer was reckless. If he acted alone, he will answer for it. But dragging the department through mud for one bad officer is political theater." Naomi opened the folder. Inside were intake sheets bearing Holt's signature, all tied to cases that had collapsed quietly over 3 years. One bad officer does not explain 12 missing evidence packets. She turned a page. One bad officer does not explain 17 complaints reassigned to inactive review. Another page. One bad officer does not explain bank deposits from companies that received city towing contracts after seizures. Holt's confidence flickered. Just once. But Naomi saw it. She always saw it. Outside the office, officers pretended not to listen while hearing every word. Brooks signaled to the federal team. Agents moved through hallways collecting desktop towers, sealed boxes, and archived files from storage rooms no one had entered in months. The copier area became a command post. Chain of custody labels appeared on everything. Holt tried another angle. "You know how this looks, Agent Carter? A black woman humiliating local police for cameras." The room cooled instantly. Naomi folded her hands. "No, Sergeant. This looks like a black woman doing paperwork while men confuse accountability with humiliation." Even Brooks had to hide a smile. Holt stood abruptly and pointed toward the bullpen. "Those officers out there risk their lives every day." Naomi stood too, matching his height with stillness instead of volume. "Then they deserve leaders who do not sell their names for cash." The office door opened. A federal analyst stepped in holding a laptop. "We imaged the sergeant's desktop." There is a hidden folder labeled Fantasy Football. He looked at Holt. It contains complaint videos, edited reports, and spreadsheets of off-book payments. No one in the bullpen moved. A coffee cup slipped from someone's hand and rolled across tile. Holt's shoulders sank as if gravity had finally remembered him. Brooks read him his status calmly and instructed agents to escort him downstairs. He looked at Naomi one last time. "You think this changes anything?" She stepped aside so he could pass. "No," she said. "I think this reveals what was already true." As agents led him through the bullpen, officers who once rushed to please him stared at keyboards, ceilings, walls, anywhere but his face. Outside, dawn broke across the lot in pale gold. Naomi watched through the glass as Holt entered the waiting vehicle. Brooks came beside her. 2 steps down. Naomi looked back at the precinct, where blinds were opening one by one. "No," she said softly. "Now they know the stairs exist." By noon, the city had traded rain for heat, and every television in every waiting room seemed tuned to the same story. Patrol corruption. Evidence tampering. Federal raids. In barber shops, courthouse lobbies, gas stations, and office break rooms, people watched clips of Daniel Mercer and Ryan Holt being escorted away. Some shook their heads. Some smiled quietly. Others simply stared with the tired expression of people who had seen too much and trusted too little. Inside the federal field office, Naomi Carter stood before a wall map covered in pins, photos, dates, and strings that looked dramatic only because the truth always appears complicated from a distance. Up close, it was simple. Money moved. Power protected itself. Innocent people paid the bill. Captain Elena Brooks entered carrying a fresh stack of subpoenas. "We have requests from 3 local stations, 2 national networks, and 1 podcast hosted by a former reality star." Naomi did not turn around. "Decline all of them." Brooks set the papers down. "You could become the face of reform by dinner." Naomi finally looked back. Faces are easy to celebrate. Systems are harder to fix. A young analyst named Trevor rushed in holding a tablet. "We cracked Holt's messaging app backups. There is another name that keeps appearing." He tapped the screen. Deputy Chief Malcolm Reeves. The room changed immediately. Reeves was polished, camera-ready, a veteran spokesman who spoke about community trust in measured tones while ribbon-cutting ceremonies applauded on cue. He attended church breakfasts, youth fundraisers, scholarship dinners. He was the kind of man institutions displayed when they wanted to look healed. Brooks exhaled slowly. "If Reeves is in this, City Hall will feel it by sunset." Naomi took the tablet and scrolled through coded messages, meeting times, references to seized cash, redirected complaints, favored promotions. Then one message stopped her cold: "Keep Carter away from anything sensitive." She read it twice. Brooks noticed. "He knew your name." Naomi nodded. "Long before I knew his." The memory arrived sharp as glass. 2 years earlier, Naomi had testified in a federal task force review after a wrongful seizure case. Reeves had shaken her hand afterward, smiled warmly, and said, "We need more professionals like you in the room." She understood now what he meant. Keep talent close enough to study. Keep threats close enough to manage. Trevor swallowed. "What do we do?" Naomi handed the tablet back. "We invite him to talk." 40 minutes later, Deputy Chief Malcolm Reeves entered the federal conference room in a tailored charcoal suit, silver tie straight, smile practiced to perfection. He carried no lawyer, which meant either confidence or arrogance. Often the same thing in better shoes. "Agent Carter," he said warmly, extending a hand. "I hate that we meet under these circumstances." Naomi looked at the offered hand, then at him. "Then tell me when you preferred to meet." He withdrew it smoothly and Saturday. Brooks remained by the wall, arms folded. Reeves clasped his hands. "I support accountability. If Mercer and Holt betrayed the badge, remove them. But dragging leadership into gossip helps no one. Naomi slid a printed message log across the table. Reeves read the first line, then the second, then set it down with controlled care. Context matters. Naomi nodded. It does. That is why we also have bank records, burner phone locations, and witness statements. Reeves smiled again, thinner now. Witnesses can be emotional. Naomi leaned forward. So can men who are finally out of exits. For the first time, he looked at her not as a symbol, not as a headline, but as danger. You think taking down a few names changes this city? He asked quietly. Naomi answered just as quietly. No. But children hearing those names might. Silence settled over the room like dust after a collapse. Outside the glass wall, agents moved briskly, phones ringing, printers spitting paper, momentum becoming its own kind of weather. Reeves stood. I would like counsel. Brooks opened the door. You should have brought one. As he stepped into the hallway, cameras from the lobby below flashed through the stairwell windows. News had traveled faster than elevators. Reeves paused and looked back at Naomi. You planned all this? Naomi remained seated. No, Deputy Chief. You did. I just kept receipts. When the door closed, Trevor let out a breath he had been holding for several minutes. Brooks looked at Naomi. 3 steps. Naomi glanced at the map on the wall, at the pin still waiting. Not yet, she said. Now the building knows it can fall. By late afternoon, Atlanta had become a city listening to itself. Talk radio lines were jammed. Social media feeds refreshed by the second. Outside police headquarters, satellite trucks lined the curb like steel dominoes, their dishes pointed skyward as if truth needed help finding orbit. Reporters rehearsed serious faces in camera reflections while citizens gathered behind barricades, trading stories they had carried for years. Inside the federal office, Naomi Carter stood alone in the evidence room, reading names from old complaint files stacked in gray banker boxes. Each folder held the same familiar ingredients: dismissed concerns, incomplete statements, missing footage, conclusions reached before questions were asked. Some files were thin because people gave up quickly. Others were thick because persistence is often punished with paperwork. Naomi opened one marked Lena Brooks, age 67. Illegal search. Medication discarded. No action taken. She closed it gently. Captain Elena Brooks entered with 2 cups of coffee and paused at the sight of the boxes. You do know there are easier ways to spend a victory lap. Naomi accepted a cup. This is not a lap. Brooks nodded toward the hallway where televisions murmured. The mayor just announced an emergency ethics review. Council wants hearings. 3 union representatives are demanding due process on camera. Naomi looked back at the files. Everyone loves due process once it belongs to them. Brooks almost laughed, then handed her a note. Someone asked to see you. In interview room 3 sat a young patrol officer Naomi recognized from the rainy curbside arrest. Officer Caleb Turner. Mid-20s, fresh haircut, hands clasped too tightly, badge polished like it still meant what he hoped it meant. He stood when she entered. Agent Carter. Naomi remained by the door. Sit down, Officer Turner. He obeyed immediately. I did not know what Mercer was doing that night. That is not why you asked for me. Turner swallowed. No, He slid a flash drive across the table. I copied dispatch backups before they could disappear. Naomi did not touch it yet. Why? Turner stared at the table for a long moment. My father was a cop. Good man. He said if you stay quiet around wrong long enough, wrong starts using your voice. Naomi sat opposite him. And when did you decide to stop being quiet? His eyes reddened, but he kept them steady. When I watched everyone in that street treat you like you were already guilty. You were calm. We were the ones shaking. She took the drive. What is on it? Selective patrol lists. Names of neighborhoods targeted for numbers. Notes on drivers to stop. Flags for people who filed complaints. Naomi's face remained unreadable, but the room seemed to sharpen around her. Who ordered it? Turner answered immediately. Reeve signed policy language. Holt managed rollouts. Mercer trained the unofficial parts. Naomi leaned back. Sometimes corruption sounded dramatic. More often it sounded administrative. She stood and opened the door. Wait here. In the operations room, analysts loaded the files while Brooks watched over their shoulders. Maps lit up with clusters of traffic stops concentrated block by block, zip code by zip code, complaint filers repeatedly targeted within weeks. Patterns no spokesman could explain away. Brooks whistled softly. This is structural. Naomi nodded. Exactly what they hoped no one would say. Minutes later, news alerts began hitting phones across the room. City Council had scheduled emergency testimony for the next morning. The mayor requested federal cooperation. Community leaders demanded records release. Momentum was no longer knocking. It had entered the building. Naomi returned to interview room 3. Turner stood again, nervous. Am I in trouble? She studied him carefully. That depends. Are you here to save yourself or tell the truth? He answered without hesitation. Both, if I am honest. Naomi appreciated honesty more than performance. Good. Keep that habit. She handed him a witness packet. You testify tomorrow. His eyes widened. Publicly? Yes. They will hate me. Naomi opened the door wider, revealing the busy hallway beyond. Agents moving, printers running, people working because someone finally spoke. Maybe, she said. But hatred fades faster than regret. As Turner stepped out, Brooks approached with another folder. You are on the witness list too. Naomi took it. I know. You ready? Brooks asked. Naomi glanced toward the windows where the evening sun burned orange behind the skyline and cameras still waited outside headquarters. No one is ever ready to tell a city what it already suspects, she said. But tomorrow, we do it anyway. Morning arrived with cameras already waiting. By 8:05 a.m., the Atlanta City Council chamber was filled beyond capacity, every wooden bench occupied, aisles lined with reporters, and late arrivals standing shoulder to shoulder near the back wall. The room carried that special kind of silence found only in courtrooms, churches, and places where lies suspect their lease is ending. Outside, protesters and supporters shared the same sidewalk under different signs. Inside, everyone faced the witness table. Naomi Carter sat there in a navy suit, posture straight, hands folded over a legal pad she had not yet touched. Beside her sat Captain Elena Brooks and Federal Counsel Leonard Hayes. Across the room, attorneys for the police union shuffled papers with the nervous speed of men billing by the hour. Council President Miriam Dalton struck the gavel once. This emergency session will come to order. Screens behind the dais displayed charts drawn from the C's dispatch records, concentrated stops in black neighborhoods, complaint filers repeatedly targeted, narcotic seizures tied to. Later dismissed cases. Murmurs rolled through the chamber like distant thunder. Dalton turned to Naomi. Agent Carter, when did your investigation begin? Naomi leaned toward the microphone. Officially, 8 months ago. Unofficially, years before that, when people started reporting patterns no one wanted to call patterns. Pens moved instantly across reporters' notebooks. Cameras zoomed. Dalton nodded. Did you personally experience misconduct during the operation? Naomi looked briefly toward the public gallery where strangers watched her as if they had known her forever. Yes. I was illegally stopped, falsely accused, publicly presumed guilty, and used as an example. It was effective theater. A few uneasy laughs escaped the room, then died quickly. Union counsel rose. Objection to characterization. Dalton barely glanced his way. This is not a trial, Counselor. Sit down. Applause tried to begin, then remembered where it was. Naomi continued. The point was not me. It was confidence. Certain officers believed they could create reality faster than facts could catch up. Dalton asked the next question softly. Why did they believe that? Naomi answered just as softly. Practice. The chamber fell still again. Then Officer Caleb Turner was sworn in. He walked to the table with the stiffness of a man stepping away from one life and toward another. His uniform was pressed, but his hands trembled slightly as he adjusted the microphone. Officer Turner, Dalton said, did selective patrol lists exist? He swallowed. Yes. Who authorized them? Deputy Chief Malcolm Reeve signed policy language. Sergeant Ryan Holt distributed priorities. Supervisors framed it as efficiency. And in practice? Turner looked toward the packed gallery, then at Naomi, then back to the council. In practice, certain neighborhoods were treated like probable cause. Gasps rippled through the room. Reporters nearly climbed over one another to reach the hallway first. Union counsel objected again, louder this time. Dalton struck the gavel once more. Sit. Down. Then came the moment no strategist could control. Council staff opened the public comment queue. First was Lena Brooks, age 67, whose file Naomi had read the day before. She approached with a cane and a purse clasped under one arm. I brought my blood pressure pills today, she said into the microphone. I learned not to trust anyone else to carry them. No speechwriter in America could compete with that sentence. Next came a college student who lost a scholarship after a false arrest. Then a father who missed 6 months of work clearing his name. Then a minister who said half his congregation had stories but no forms left to file. Each testimony was brief. Each one heavier than the last. By noon, the chamber no longer felt like a hearing. It felt like a city remembering itself out loud. During recess, cameras swarmed the hallway. Naomi moved through them without slowing. Agent Carter, are more arrests coming? Yes. How high does this go? High enough to matter. Why stay calm through all of this? Naomi paused at the elevator doors and looked directly into the nearest lens. Because panic is expensive. Truth is patient. Upstairs, council members drafted emergency measures, independent oversight, body camera audits, complaint reopening, dispatch reform. Downstairs, people hugged strangers. Across town, officers watched on televisions mounted in station break rooms, some angry, some relieved, many suddenly aware that silence had become visible. As the elevator doors closed, Brooks stood beside Naomi and asked the only question left worth asking. Do you think today changed the city? Naomi watched the floor numbers rise one by one. No, she said. I think today proved the city was ready to change itself. 3 weeks later, the city looked the same from a distance. Traffic still crawled along the downtown connector. Street vendors still argued cheerfully over change. Afternoon sun still flashed off glass towers and courthouse windows. But up close, small things had shifted. Complaint desks that once sent people away now had lines and translators. Body camera audit notices were posted in precinct hallways. Supervisors who had never returned calls were suddenly answering them on the first ring. And in living rooms across Atlanta, families were speaking names they had once buried under phrases like "let it go" and "nothing will happen anyway." Inside Fulton County Superior Court, rows of benches filled early for the first formal hearing tied to the corruption cases. Daniel Mercer sat at the defense table in a plain suit that seemed surprised to be worn by him. Ryan Holt sat 2 rows behind with counsel, staring straight ahead. Malcolm Reeves entered last, no cameras allowed inside now, no podium waiting, no polished statement to offer. The room smelled of old wood, paper, and consequence. Naomi Carter took a seat in the gallery beside Captain Elena Brooks. She wore a simple gray jacket and carried no badge in sight. She did not need one today. Leonard Hayes leaned over from the aisle seat. Charges accepted. Additional indictments likely by Friday. Naomi nodded once. Good. At the front, the judge reviewed schedules, discovery deadlines, witness protections, records preservation. It was procedural, almost dull. That was fitting. The dramatic part had been the abuse. Justice often arrived wearing paperwork and reading glasses. During a recess, reporters gathered outside the courthouse steps behind barriers. They had hoped Naomi would speak. She declined 3 times before one younger reporter called out, "Agent Carter, people say you became a symbol. What do you say to them?" Naomi stopped halfway to the car and turned back. "Symbols cannot reopen files," she said. "People can." She kept walking. Across town, Officer Caleb Turner stood in a training room before a new class of recruits. 20 faces watched him with the uncertainty of those who had joined for different reasons. On the screen behind him were 2 words, authority and trust. He erased authority first. "You can be given power," he told them. "Trust has to volunteer." At City Hall, council members voted unanimously for an independent oversight board. In neighborhoods once targeted by selective patrol lists, community meetings were suddenly packed. Some came hopeful. Some came angry. Many came because for the first time in years, attendance felt less pointless than silence. That evening Naomi finally made it to her mother's house on the west side. The screen door squeaked the same way it had since childhood. The kitchen smelled of rosemary chicken and sweet potatoes. Her mother looked her up and down, then at the pie box in Naomi's hands. "Store-bought again?" Naomi smiled. "I dismantled half a network this month. Baking had to wait." Her mother took the pie anyway. Justice is no excuse for shortcuts. They laughed, and for a moment the city, the hearings, the cameras, all of it faded into the ordinary miracle of being home. After dinner, Naomi stepped onto the porch with a glass of iced tea. Streetlights hummed softly. Kids rode bicycles in circles under the fading sky. Somewhere nearby, music drifted from an open window. Brooks called her phone. "You watching the news?" "No, you should." Naomi turned on the small porch television. A local anchor stood outside headquarters announcing 3 more arrests and the resignation of a commissioner. Then the segment cut to community footage from weeks earlier: rain, flashing lights, a woman standing calm beside a curb while men in uniform believed they had already won. The screen froze on Naomi's face. The anchor said, "Many are calling that night the turning point." Naomi switched the television off. Her mother opened the screen door behind her. "Why turn it off?" Naomi looked out at the neighborhood, at porch lights blinking on one by one like quiet witnesses. "Because turning points are only useful if you keep walking." Her mother handed her a plate with a slice of pie. "Then eat first." Naomi accepted it and smiled into the warm Georgia night. Some people wear a badge to be feared. Some carry truth long enough to be heard. And sometimes, when a city is ready, hearing becomes change.